Hi class, how's it going? Today I want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of geography and why geography is important in history. I hope it's going to be fun and that we can really learn about different types of geography and what geography is and how that connects to history and our study in history, US history this year. Let me go ahead and share my screen to here. And here we go. So we got this question, why is geography important? That is what I want you to be able to answer by the end of this class, is I can answer why geography is important. I have this as a Venn diagram here of different types of geography. It's not just like, oh, geography is one thing. There are so many different ways to study geography. On this left side here, we have a list of different physical geography aspects. And on the right side, we have human geography aspects. And we're going to talk a little bit about those as we get to them. And it's really important to understand geography, because if you don't, you're going to turn out like Anakin Skywalker, because Anakin did not understand the geographical context that Obi-Wan had the high ground. He said, no, I'm way more powerful. And he underestimated the power of geography and lost 2 of his legs and his arm. So don't be like Anakin Skywalker. Understand geography, because it could be very important to you like it was to him, and it was his fault that he didn't study geography, even if he was a very powerful Jedi. So physical geography is this first one. Physical geography is geography that deals with places and what, like different physical features like rivers, canyons, erosion. And physical geography can tend to lean more towards science than it does like history. But it does have very important aspects that pertain to history, so we should study parts of it and understand it. So let's go through some of those examples. One of the first things in that Venn diagram was hydrology, and that's basically the study of water on Earth's surface. So people who do this will try and like study water, make sure it's clean water, trying to make sure that we have enough water to drink and that we don't use all of Earth's water. And these are what these kinds of people are doing. So they study the different like water cycles and such like that. This is important because water is really important for us, and it's been really important throughout history because it's necessary for our survival. And so knowing where water is and how to find it is also very important in history. Climatology is another important aspect. Climatology is the study of long-term weather patterns. And that's going to be important in a second when we talk about meteorology. But climatology is about the patterns and the things we see over and over. So on this map right here, you can see over 30 years the normal precipitation rate. And what's really important about that is it's just the average of amount of rain or snow that has come down. And we can see like different areas like, oh, why would someone live over here? Like, oh, because yeah, there's no water over here. And climatologists will deal with issues like this and also the issues of climate change. But I want to show you something that could be interesting, how to connect geography to where people live. Notice where the people live. Here's a map of the United States. The same climatology map is here on the right. And I think it's interesting to notice right here down the middle, you see a long line of kind of where the lights start to get dimmer. There's not as many of them. But you can pinpoint areas where there's still a lot of lights, but it's not as many. And you can look at this and it's like, I wonder if it's connected where people live, where there's more water. I think that's probably a connection we can make. And that's one way climatology can be important in understanding where people live and why certain things have happened in certain areas, because there's people there and people are where history happens. Biogeography is the study of plants and like the distribution of plants. And this is really important, especially in early history, like with hunter and gatherers, that they study and try and understand what's going on there. And it's really important in this TV show for a second as well.
You're looking at the rare white dragon bush. Its leaves make a tea so delicious, it's heartbreaking. That, or it's the white jade bush, which is poisonous.
We need food, not tea. I'm going fishing.
Delectable tea or deadly poison?
That's a funny video of Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender, who has a difficulty in knowing his biogeography. He doesn't know his plants and he doesn't know where they grow. And he ends up using that plant to make tea, and it is the poisonous plant, so he has to get that solved. That's one reason why biogeography is important, especially for people who needed to gather their food from the wilderness. Geomorphology is the study of changes in the earth and the changes beneath the earth's surface. And you'll talk a lot about this in like a geology class, but in a history class, this isn't as important because this takes a long time to happen, a really long time, that it doesn't really change over history as much as like it does. Like if you're studying dinosaurs and like that thing has changed, this has changed a lot since dinosaurs, but like in our time that we're studying, there's not going to be a lot of difference. Meteorology is something that's really important though, and it's the different meteorologists learn how to forecast the weather and like see like different weather patterns like they're happening now. This is different from climatology because it's not a pattern that has happened over and over again, but you're researching what's happening now and how to like protect people from it. And this is there's an important moment in history that we're going to talk about later. There's this battle in the Revolutionary War in 1776 called the Battle of Long Island. And this is where George Washington and his troops were trapped on Long Island, and the British were going to pretty much end the war and capture George Washington and end the war, and the British would have won. But the weather that day, there's some fog that came up, and George Washington and his army was able to escape across the river and head back into New York City because they were able to get on the boats and escape in the fog, and the British couldn't see them. So this is a moment in history when weather really has impacted what happens in history. Pedology is the study of dirt, and it might sound kind of boring to you. It's because it's dirt, but it's really important to know about this in studying crops and where they grow and where people where they grew crops. So it's important to know that. Human geography is also really important in knowing about history, and more so because this type of geography pertains more to people, and people are what history is all about. So this first one, social geography, studies differences in social classes. So there's this link, I'm going to click on it right here. And it's going to show a map of New York City. This is on the New York Times, and it shows, according to census group, like how many people occupy New York City and according to like a race group. So let's see if it maps. Okay, here's the map here. So we can see over here, we have blue dots translating to black people. Hispanics are kind of oranges, Asians red, whites are green, and then other races are purple. So we can look here, and here in Manhattan here, we got like downtown Manhattan here. See, there's a lot of Asians down here. And this is where Chinatown is. You can kind of see the Chinatown there. Then we have a lot of white people here. And then we move up, like up into more uptown, and all of a sudden you just see like a change. There's a big change. Like, whoa, like why does everything change here? And this is what social geographers are interested in. They are the ones interested in learning about these types of like, why is there a distinct line there? What happened? And in history, we can kind of discover like what things have happened to form those lines of why people live where they do. Cultural geography is another important one, because culture is basically everything about a person and like their people and what builds them. And for example, language is a really important part of culture. And we have words here for snow because we get a lot of snow here in Utah. But in Alaska and like some of the Inuit tribes, they have several different words for snow because there's a lot more snow and there's a lot more different snow, and then they understand it differently. And that's a way culture is a little bit different. Here's another example in shelters, and we're going to be talking a little bit about this next week in Native American shelters. These are all shelters within the United States and Native American groups that used to live here. So we have right here, this is what's called a longhouse, and this was often seen in the Northeast tribes, and we'll talk about that, made of wood, and it's very long, like lots of skins on the inside. But here, this is what's called a wickiup, and this is more in the Great Basin region. They didn't have as much wood and trees, so they had to make do with what they had. And down here, even in the Southwest, that's what Mesa Verde, I believe, and they would use clay to build houses because they had no plants at all. Like really, they have some plants here, but not enough to build homes. And then in places such as the Arctic, they have a bunch of ice, but not a lot more. So they use ice to like make themselves warmer, which is kind of interesting. Here's another example. Economic geography is not just having to do with money, but the way people make choices. So we can look at this map here, and this is about money, and it's talking about the different profitable industries in all these states. And we can look here, it's like, so Utah is their main industry is precious metals and stones. And I think that's kind of funny because maybe it's because a lot of people get married in Utah and they're trying to buy those rings. So there you go. But you can interpret the map a little bit differently. And economic geography is really important when we start studying the three different colonial regions in a few weeks, because there's different reasons why people move to the south of New England, and there's different groups and how those differences developed. So understanding this kind of geography is really important in understanding history because it's the way people made choices. Political geography is probably the one we're the most familiar with, and that's the branch of geography that deals with boundaries. And so these are very important, and if you were to cross a boundary, things change, but they only change because we've set it up that way. For example, here in Utah, we have what's called Four Corners, which is where Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico all meet. And this is like the spot. You can go stand and you're in all four states, and it's a tourist attraction. But it's only a tourist attraction because we have these boundaries. If you're to look around here, you'd look in any direction and you wouldn't be able to know which state was which because it's all like the same landscape. But it's through those political boundaries that we find this attraction here. And that's an example of how political boundaries affect geography. And there's a lot more controversial political boundaries, like such as, what about the boundary between the United States and Mexico? And what about boundaries like North and South Korea, or other things like that? There's all sorts of boundaries that are super important because we've made them super important. So what I want you to think about right now is, why is geography important? I've kind of gone over a few different types of geography in hopes that you see the different importances where geography can help you understand history. That's also the other question I want you to answer. Why is geography important to understand history?
Holly Tippett, please come to the main office. Holly Tippett.
And you get a special announcement there on my Zoom, so there you go. But that's one thing I want you to think about. Why is geography important in understanding history, and why is history important overall? I hope this has been beneficial for you, and that you are able to, like, oh, geography is actually kind of interesting. And if there is something more interesting to you that you want to learn about, please let me know and I'll be happy to help.